I think that when you try too hard, you're asking for disaster with what you're doing. So I try to just let it happen naturally.
Welcome to the Indie Seat. My name is Nick Olivera. My guest today is a traveling singer, songwriter, storyteller, Taylor James. Taylor?
How's it going?
How you doing?
Good. Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so I want to get into what it means to be a traveling singer-songwriter, especially during these times.
Yeah, it's very difficult. The road is where you find a lot of meaning when you're in this profession. I feel like it gives you a certain identity, and the road has a lot to do with the songs that I write, the stories that I tell. Everything should, if it's good, come from experience, or you should be able to tap into a narrative of the song that you're writing by, having that experience yourself in some cases. And the road brings a lot of fulfillment with that. So not being able to travel, of course, is difficult, but you try to find other avenues to express and find inspiration and creativity.
So when you're on the road, I mean, what kind of are you going out looking for experiences to write about, or is this just they fall on your lap?
I think that when you try too hard, you're asking for disaster with what you're doing. So I try to just let it happen naturally. We were talking about earlier the similarities between comedians and musicians, and I think that when you find a moment, you're talking to somebody or somebody says something, you say, "Oh, I gotta write that down." I think that's you look for that, but you're not trying too hard for it. I guess you're hoping that it happens, and maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But if it does, then usually you have something special.
It's like that Mitch Hedberg joke where he's like, I thought of a funny joke the other day, but I couldn't find a pen, so I had to convince myself that it wasn't funny.
Yeah.
Like if it's so good that you gotta write it down, then
that's it. Because I was just telling a friend the other day, my dad came in the back. I was my parents live in Alabama. Me and my brother were in the back room drinking, and he came back there and just started talking to us and told us this great story about how he grew up. He used to be a professional dirt car racer, and he was just telling us this story about how much he loved it, and he would go as a 18, 19-year-old, and after the race he would drink and stay at the track all night until the sun rose just to be at the track. And I was like, I'm going to write all this down. This is going to make a great song. And then I didn't write it down, and then later I completely forgot all of it. So it's very important. You have to write it down, because if not, then you have to feel less bad about letting it slip out of your head. So.
Wait, so you mentioned being from Alabama. How does an Alabama boy end up in Florida?
Well, I'm originally from Indiana. My parents live in Alabama now, but I was born and raised till, all my formative years till I was like 15 was in Indiana. We lived on the west coast of Florida from the time I was like 15 to 23. I moved out of Florida for a couple years, traveled, got really my music background behind me. And then when I got off the road, there wasn't really anything interesting happening in Alabama, so I was looking for a chance to find something new. My girlfriend had just moved from West Palm to Miami and started her life here, and she's like, why don't you come to Miami for a few months and see how your music goes? 3 years later, I'm still here and grinding, and been lucky enough to have some great things happen to me. So really all by chance and happenstance. So
you mentioned being on the road and getting earning your colors in music. I mean, what is it about, I guess, being a traveling artist that refines somebody's vision?
I think that the road defines you a lot. With my dad being a dirt car racer, he traveled all the time. We grew up traveling. I spent a lot of my growing up in a motorhome in a new city every night. So I think that was kind of birthed into me a little bit, and I was conditioned that way. So then when I was old enough to choose my life, career, the directions I would go, it only seemed fitting to find something that would accompany the road. And traveling really does. I mean, you're meeting new people all the time. You're seeing different cultures. You're meeting people of all different backgrounds, walks of life. Maybe they're from that area. Maybe they're just in town for the night, whatever. And you're interacting with people that maybe you wouldn't be interacting with if you just lived your whole life in one town. And so I think that seeing a wider scope, it's widened my scope politically, it's widened my scope spiritually, mentally, it's widened it as a songwriter. So when you go to sit down, you have those people's experience with you. I'm a big Bruce Springsteen's a big influence of mine, Bob Dylan, and Springsteen says, inside I felt like I was carrying the broken spirits of all the other ones who had lost. So there's plenty of people that have great experiences, bad experiences, that never document them, like a songwriter or a comedian or an artist of any type. And I think that when you get back, you feel a certain responsibility to those folks that you met that had an impact on you to tell their story in your voice, or something that happened to you that changed your narrative forever. So
I love that you talk about, it is something that I think it's why our country responds to like an artist like Springsteen, because he has like this, I call it like a blue collar poetry.
Yeah, for sure.
I remember I was working at a school a couple years back, and I woke up real early, the sun was coming up, and I saw a security guard out front, and she was just looking at it wistfully, and I just said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And she said, "Oh, just watching the sunset." And then she just sighed. He used all the colors today. And that's just something that I feel like that little nugget is just going to be lost in time, and it's guys like you or Dylan who kind of document it.
It was nice to be put in his category in this sentence, but yeah, for me that's what Dylan and Bruce did, was they defined the American story. It's a lot of different stories in one. I don't know if you ever get to a point to where you tell it right for everybody. If anyone has, it's Bruce and Dylan. But yeah, I think that's really what it's about. Is the road also provides a landscape, and those guys are landscape artists. Their songs are very visual, and I think that if you can let somebody tap into a visual image of what you're doing, that's the best thing that you can do. You can make them escape. Music was an escape for me, so the least I can do, you can never fully repay your heroes for the things that they've done for your muses, but what you can do is you can do your best in your own art to give that to other people.
You mentioned your dad was a dirt bike racer, like
dirt car racer.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, was he more, I don't know whether to describe it as like a sport or if it's more like showmanship? How do you define that? Yeah,
it's a little bit of both, honestly. These guys are just as equally passionate about what they do as anybody that I've met on the scene in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, anywhere across the country. They spend more money than they make on most weeks just to go out and do it. So I got to see that at an early age, that my dad was highly dedicated to it. He was working a 40-hour or more week. He's an entrepreneur, so sometimes it was a lot more than that, and he wouldn't come home until he got accomplished what he wanted to get accomplished as far as sales and entrepreneurship goes. And then he would come home and find the time to go in the shop and work on the car. My dad gave Tony Stewart his first ride at a dirt track when he was too young to get into the track, and now Tony owns the track in Ohio that my dad let him race his car at. My dad just knew there was something special about this young kid and his love of racing. So I think there's a huge element of showmanship, a huge element of artistic. There's something artistic about it.
Do you think you have your father's work ethic?
No. I think his generation has way stronger work ethic than my generation does, for sure. But I try to work really hard. I don't work hard at anything as much as I work hard at the music and trying to grow that. But I think maybe that was a thing that took so long to get in my dad's grasp with my music, was because they came from the generation of manual labor, and now your son's going to be a songwriter. What kind of career or future is that going to lead for him? But I think that as time went on, he started to see a direction with it. But yeah, no, I wouldn't say. But I definitely got my my addictive personality to my craft from my dad, for sure.
As an artist, do you think you have an obligation to, I guess, speak out on current events? Or do you think the artist has the right to just make art and not speak about anything?
Well, in folk music, there's a long history, starting with Woody Guthrie, Pete Seeger. Woody Guthrie wrote This Land Is Your Land, which was kind of a response to Irving Berlin's God Bless America. And Woody never got on the radio, never played for big crowds, never sold out Madison Square Garden, never had an Instagram or Facebook page. But Woody, heard about what was going on in a local scene and politically most of the time, and then went and told that story somewhere else. He didn't have a tour bus or a plane to take him there. He hitchhiked or walked to get there. Pete took that music, and then Dylan took the music from Pete, and then so many guys after. I do think that there's an element of putting in that stuff. I try not to be so blatant with it, because I want to invite everybody. You know, I just told somebody today, I've always felt more from music and from live performance than I ever have been in any sort of religious setting. And so I want everyone to come. And if you're too specific and you're too, here it is, then I think that you cut a certain audience off, whatever type of audience it is. And I'd rather have people of all different types. I like people to dig in, dig into what I'm doing. And if they dig in, they can find something that might mean one thing to them and one thing to somebody else. So I try to write abstractly, but also try to get it to where there's something in it for everybody. So I think that it's a thin line. Sometimes you have to speak out on things, but you also have to make sure that if you're going to speak out about it, it better be good. I had a buddy tell me recently that he's doing a song about a specific political cause. And what do I think about that? I said, well, I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell you about all music. It's got to be good. It's got to be good. I don't care what you're talking about. It's got to be good. And if it's good, it'll cut through. If it's not, it doesn't matter what you're talking about. It has to jab into your heart a little bit. So. You can find me on Instagram at Taylor James Davis or on Facebook at the official Taylor Davis, available on all the streaming platforms. So, yeah, I hope you check me out.
My name is Nick Olivera. You've been watching The Indie Seat, brought to you by Context of a Generation. Tune in next time.
So that was the Indie Seat. If you like what you saw and you want to be a partner, or if you want to collaborate with us, even if you're an artist and you want to submit your work, check out our website, contextofageneration.org, or go ahead and submit an email to us at submit@contextofageneration.org. And for all the artists, make sure you put your name, your social media handles, and attach some of your work as well. And for those who are interested in being a partner or collaborating, please email us and we would love to reach back out. Peace. That was the Indie Seat. Thank you.